Our guys are working hard to finish the semester strong. We've just got some guys that have exams today, a few that are done already, and then several of our guys have some stuff to finish up next week. So it's an exciting time from the standpoint of, putting another really good semester academically in the books for these guys, taking another step towards graduation. On the court, our main focus is continuing to move forward, and the best way to do that is focusing on each other and specifically what's important right now, not getting too caught up in anything that happened earlier in the year or anything that's coming up later in the year. Just focusing on the present moment, what we need to do in this game against Grand Canyon, what we need to do in our preparation, the energy that guys need to give each other, the focus and the attention to detail on the scouting report, having a respect for what goes into winning, regardless of the opponent, but then understanding what this particular opponent does. That's where our focus has been. Our guys have been really good practice-wise. We get one more deposit to put in this afternoon, and then excited about our game tomorrow afternoon.
Questions, go ahead.
Your last two wins, both against good teams, first Roach and then Matt Coleman, had great games. Is that the kind of thing you need from them to beat good teams, to have at least have that one guy come through for you offensively?
It sure helps. It goes a long way towards winning. We sat down, I forget exactly what day it was, but it was one of the days in the preseason before we had played any games. And I had on a whiteboard all the games from last year in the Big 12. And I had the score, I had the date of the games, and I had them separated by wins and losses. And the point I was making to those two guys, the two guys you mentioned, is almost to a game. Really, almost every one of those games, whether it was a win or a loss, when our perimeter guys, when our guards outplayed the other teams, we won. But when the other team's guards outplayed ours, we lost. Obviously, there's other positions that factor into the game, but college basketball, all coaches say it all the time, it's a guards game. It's dominated by the guards, and it's not just about scoring. There's other things that factor into impacting winning for your team. But to your point, Snoop having a huge scoring output against North Carolina, Matt scoring 22 points the other day against Purdue is really, really big for our team.
Kind of going off that, obviously the guards need to play well for y'all. Is there one sort of stat, or maybe a couple, that you look at each game and you really say, this is going to determine or have, the most critical impact, I guess, on whether we win or lose this game? Is there one statistic that y'all sort of look at, tell guys to hone in on?
We look at a lot of statistics. Let's see. If we boil it down to one or two, we actually have 3 on defense and 3 on offense that we measure, and we compare each game to where we want to be, kind of a standard. On offense, one of them is how many points we score in the first 7 seconds of the shot clock. One of them is our assist-to-turnover ratio. And our guys, specifically with that one, with the assist-to-turnover ratio, our guards have done a really good job this year for the most part. We've had a couple games, VCU for sure, and then our last game against Purdue was too many turnovers. But if you look at our guards' assist-to-turnover ratio, they're almost where we would want them to be. Snoop, I think, is leading the way, doing a really good job. But that's one for sure that we look closely at. Obviously, to get an assist, you have to make the shot. But a lot of times, what goes into making the shot is ball movement, playing with pace, not allowing the ball to stick or not dribbling it 50 times in a row. And that's something that we continue to work on every day in practice.
Yeah, and Snoop sort of mentioned the other day that he passed really well in that Purdue game, and you sort of bring up the hockey assist sort of thing. Guys like to see obviously assists on the box score zone, but you have to sort of hammer home that point a little bit that
we do.
The pass that leads to the pass that leads to the bucket is just as important.
Well, especially with the way that we're playing, sometimes when you come off a pick and roll and you got 2 guys on you, you may not be able to pass it right to the roll man just because of help defense or because of hands. But if you throw it ahead to the next guy, he can make that pass, and it's a basket for Texas. And our guys, I think there's an understanding and awareness of that, but the next step is just complete and total buy-in at all times to making that right play. It's a shift. I mean, as a younger guard, especially in high school and AAU, you want that thing in your hands. You want to be pounding it. You want to be, crossing over and making different dribble moves. But so often, particularly with the way that defenses play at the college level, the right thing to do is just move it, to the next guy. And when our guys have done that, we've been better on offense.
Is it fair to say that the pace at which the ball moves is maybe the most vital thing to you guys offensively in terms of success? Like you can probably see on tape when it moves side to side or in and out at a different pace, that's when you guys are at your best.
I would say, Dustin, that's as important in terms of process-related stuff as anything else. If you say, well, what's the most important thing? It's easy to say, well, the ball going in when we shoot it, but that's not completely under our control. So to your point, in terms of things that we can control, the pace at which our bodies move down the floor and within the half court, and the pace at which the ball moves is as important as anything.
Are you seeing with Snoop opportunities for him to get to the free throw line more? I mean, you look at his free throw rates in his career, and surprisingly, this one's down relative to his other seasons. Are you guys seeing some things where he could have some more opportunities to get to the line?
Absolutely, and I thought he did a good job in the Purdue game, driving and attacking. He got to the line 4 times, but he also got in the paint a lot. Both of Matt's last 2 threes were created because Snoop got in the paint. So that's something that we've emphasized to him. One thing that Snoop has done a great job of this whole off season and early this season, he gets in the gym every night. He comes back to Cooley and he gets, sometimes 400 shots, sometimes 500 shots. And so he's really worked on his shooting, and he takes pride in his shooting. But the point that I've made to him is I don't want that to take away from your ability to utilize your athleticism driving the basketball. When he was a freshman, he was not as good of an outside shooter, both in reality and in his mind. I mean, he kind of knew that his strength was putting the ball on the floor. So to your point, his free throw rate was phenomenal as a freshman. And we actually had a lot of conversations going into that next year. Hey, man, you should get to the foul line 10 times a game. Maybe that was too lofty of a goal, but if you projected it out by minutes played, we knew he was going to play a lot more. So we definitely need him attacking, getting to the foul line. I think the Purdue game, he did a better job of that for sure than he did the 2 games before that. So we need to keep building on that.
During the preseason, you said you were harping on that a lot to kind of be more aggressive and be more vocal with the guys. Seeing him make clutch plays down the stretch like he did in the last game, did you say anything after that game, say, hey, that's what we need, or anything like that?
Well, I think after a game like that, it's just as important after a successful game for an individual player or for a team to look at why you were able to create success, as it is important to look at those things after a game that didn't go your way. I mean, it's really, really key. And at the same time, you don't want to assume it's just going to happen. You got to make it happen. For Matt, the number one key for him is playing with joy and an excitement and passion for the game. I've told him in the past, I am going to coach you hard. I'm going to be very demanding of you. But when you get out there on the court, you're out there, and I'm not. I'm on the sidelines as are the rest of the coaches. So we want you to attack and play the way that you know how to play and the way you've been for a long, long time. I thought he got back to that in the Purdue game. That doesn't guarantee for him that it's just going to happen again. The next time we play, he's got to make it happen. And there's an interaction there with his teammates that factors into that, because basketball is a team sport, and it's one in which the energy that you give off affects your teammates. The energy that they give you affects you. And hopefully he's understanding that more and more.
Do you find yourself being a little more hands-on with guys like Jericho and Dylan than maybe you anticipated going into the season in terms of just their mindset, having those guys not on the floor a lot during key stretches of the game? Like, that was probably not something you expected.
Well, I mean, yes is a short answer to your question. Those guys Well, I wouldn't lump them together in that Jericho is still, he's early in his sophomore year. He still has a great deal of mental and emotional growth that I think will help him better utilize the physical skills and capabilities that he has. This year is such a different year for him in that expectations, first and foremost, in his own mind, and secondly, with a lot of people around him, are just night and day different from last year. That's still something he's adjusting to. But to answer your question, yes. I mean, we spend a lot of time talking about how he can be successful and how he can process mentally and emotionally the things that come his way, both during the game and after the game. With Dylan, the goal is just to get him to be the most attacking, aggressive, proactive DO he can be, and to not, we don't want him playing out of avoidance. Unfortunately, I learned a long time ago, you don't not play out of avoidance by saying avoiding, if that makes sense. You have to create an aggressive, something that you're going after in your mind, whether it's an opponent, whether it's some type of goal, number of rebounds, number of deflections. You have to go after something. And that's something that, we've talked a lot about. Dylan, when he's been at his best here, in a similar way to Matt, he's been more carefree and just attacking. But the reality is at this level, there is a lot on the line, and there are, certain things that you can't necessarily guarantee are going to happen for guys. They got to go make them happen. And you do your best job as a coaching staff to put them in the right position to do that. But Dylan and I had a conversation yesterday. We don't want you to never shoot an outside shot because you can make them. We don't necessarily want you to always shoot, when you catch the ball outside, because you're a good driver too and you can create other things. What that does is it creates a responsibility for a player to make a decision. But that's why we brought you here, man. We believe that you can make that decision. We believe that you can do both of those things and understand when to do each. So, yes, there has been a lot of conversation about that. In addition to, regardless of how the game is going individually for each of those guys, finding a way to provide positive energy for their team and leadership for their team, particularly on Dylan's part, because he's a guy as much as anyone on our team that people look to for leadership.
What does he do, when he does pass up the three and drives, sometimes his shots are in the lane or short. What can he do about it?
Practice it, work on it, continue attacking with aggressiveness. We think, when he gets in the lane, he's able to make some good things happen. But, to your point, he's not all the way there yet in terms of, I don't know that he's ever going to be perfect in that regard. But, basketball-wise, we always say play off 2 feet. He's better when he's playing with a wider base and making the right decision in there. But we think it puts a lot of pressure on the defense when he is able to get deep around the basket. So we want him to continue to do that and really focus on finishing when he gets in there.
Does that help the centers, even if he, say, misses that shot?
It can. Yeah, it can put you in position to rebound, puts the other team in position to foul sometimes. Dylan can come in there and create help and find other guys. So, he's created some really good plays for our team at times when he's done that.
Shaka, I wanted to ask about Peppa. Knowing how hard it is to get to his hometown, that seems like a veteran coaching move of you to dispatch Darren Horn to go to his graduation this past summer.
I don't know if it's a veteran move. It was just what Darren said that he would do. Darren was being a man of his word.
Yeah.
He had.
Did he promise that during recruiting? He would. Maybe not promise.
It was talked about for sure, and Kamaka signed with us in November, so he was coming to school here either way. Right. But to me, it's less about the recruiting and more about the relationship and building a relationship, and it's just an example of something that, as a staff, we try to connect with guys. You know, we try to find ways to make sure that the family knows that we're invested in the young man as a person and as a basketball player and as a student. And we understand that there's a journey that he's about to go through, and now when you drop him off here in Austin, we become the primary overseers of everything that happens during that journey. So we're excited about Kamaka. He's making a lot of progress. He obviously played a lot of minutes against Purdue and helped our team in a lot of ways, even though he only made one shot.
Yeah, we've talked about this with all these different guys over the last few years, but here's a guy who basically dominated his level as a freshman and sophomore, and then I guess you could say dominated as a junior, played really well as a senior. But then he gets here and everyone is as good or better.
Yep.
How has he adjusted to that specifically?
We're actually just watching tape in the office and talking about that exact thing, Brian. He's a unique kid, first of all. Comes from a very, very different cultural background than anyone I've coached. I think where he comes from really helps him have a sense of perspective. But at the same time, he's a freshman in college, and he wants to do well, and he only has 91 minutes under his belt. And with each passing game, as he gains more minutes, he will gain confidence. His teammates and his coaches are always on him about shooting when he's open. He's a really, really good shooter. He's going to make a lot of shots over the course of his career. But the game does come at him fast right now. And sometimes a play presents itself, but he's not quite ready. So a lot of it is just helping him gain the readiness. But he's a better player than he was a month ago. And that's what you want with freshmen is for them to take steps over the course of their freshman year. The interesting thing about him is there's certain things about him as a player that are real strengths, and then there's certain things that he knows are major areas for improvement.
Given where he comes from, do you cite other players like, say, what's his name, Gonzaga, Hachimura?
Mm-hmm.
Look, it's a process. Can you show him a guy like that who's now considered a lottery pick?
We do. I mean, unfortunately, that makes a ton of sense to you and I. Guys, they're not as interested in hearing about those type of stories. I mean, we talk a lot about those type of guys that had humble beginnings to their careers and ended up as All-Americans or as lottery picks. But Kamaka's, he's been good. I mean, he understands that he is going through a process. He understands he needs to get better in a lot of ways. He understands the value of relationships. I showed him today that actually, if you go by possession, he has by far the best plus-minus on our team, which means our team scores more than the other team the most when he's in the game if you go by possession. And he was like, really? You know, he didn't even really know what plus-minus he didn't fully understand what it was, so I explained that to him. So the exciting thing is he's got all these areas where he can continue to get better, but he's already impacting the team in a lot of ways.
And that's what I wonder. Talking about expanding his role, I mean, obviously, it seems like if you didn't know anything about the coaching, you would say his role is, okay, when he's in there, he wants to shoot that wing three.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, at what point do you say, okay, that's good, all right, but now let's try some other things?
Yeah, well, actually, one of the best things he does for us, Brian, is, Dustin, to your question, he moves the ball better than anyone on our team. He really does a good job facilitating ball movement in our offense. There was a great one against Purdue where we came off a screen, we threw it ahead to him, a guy rotated to him, and he quickly popped it to the corner for an open shot. I think it might have been for Courtney. And the ball was in his hands for like 0.5 seconds. And that's good. We need more of that. That's part of the reason that our team is better on offense when he's in, if you go statistically. Now, with that being said, he's got one deflection in 91 minutes. All right, so I mean, so there's other areas that obviously where he needs to keep getting better. You know, when teams play against us, they try to drive him. So a lot of it depends on matchups and how the game's going. But I do think he's getting better in all those areas, and that bodes well for him.
Do you find yourself more willing to accept maybe a guy's defensive issues because offense has been a struggle for y'all at times?
Yes.
And defense has been pretty consistent?
Yes. I mean, the slant has been more towards offense in a lot of ways, that being one of them. You know, we practice offense a lot more than we have in the past. You know, I've always, if you go back and look at practice plans, you know, we just had a ton of defensive stuff in our practices. And but right now, with where our team is, where we need to get better more is on offense. Now, again, the way my mind works, it's like, man, we could have held those guys so many less points, you know. So, and at the end of the day, you're trying to win the game, so that both are equally important, and both impact each other. You know, when you stop the other team from scoring, and so they miss the shot, and you get the rebound, or you turn them over, you have a better chance to score on the other end. So they impact each other. But absolutely, after one of our games recently that we lost, you know, as a coaching staff, we all sat in there and we said we got to get Kamaka in there more, because I think it was a game in which he played like 3 minutes and had 3 like glaring defensive mistakes, and it was like during the game, like, man, it's hard to play him right now, you know, because we're trying to stop these guys. But you know, after the game, we said just got to get him in there more.
Two last ones. Is that this is kind of a bigger picture question, but that's the thing about y'all's defense. Your defense at times has been good to great. Rebounding is okay. I got to think that's why you probably feel pretty positive about where things are. Is if y'all can just get a few more points,
yes,
you're right there.
Yeah, and there's so many more areas on defense where we can get better. You mentioned rebounding. You know, our first shot defense has been very good. In other words, the percentage that teams are shooting on their first shot, or, you know, our ability to turn them over before they even get a shot. But too often they're getting the ball back. And, you know, whether it's us or any other team's chances of scoring on their second shot, their third shot, their fourth shot, it goes up with each shot. And so we do feel like, as we tell our guys, that's low-hanging fruit. I mean, that's something that we can and absolutely need to and will get better at. So that's why there's a ton of emphasis on executing better and making more open shots and, you know, finding the open man. You know, one thing that doesn't get talked about much when you do it well, but flat out helped us win the game against Purdue is free throw shooting. You know, we had not shot the ball well from the foul line going into the game, and we were 15 for 16, you know, in a close game. That makes all the difference. So all those are areas where if you can get 4 or 5 extra points here, you know, you can get 2 or 3 extra points there. You make, you know, 2 or 3 less turnovers. Now all of a sudden you're talking about 10, 12, 15 more points, and that makes all the difference.
Last one. You guys have been about a 9-man rotation right now. Do you envision that remaining consistent, or, you know, where are maybe guys like Gerald and Royce in terms of potentially cracking that, or their development overall? Royce
had his best practice yesterday since he's been at Texas. And it's funny, he hit me after practice, and he was like, you know, Coach, because he knew, you know, I practiced really well, you know. And so one of the things that I told him briefly, you know, over text when we were texting, but we'll get together and talk about this in person, is just consistency, you know, continuing to do that, because he was terrific. You know, I think from a player standpoint, the mentality, and I get this, I was probably like this as a player, is play me more and I'll show you what I can do. You know, I think, you know, most coaches say, hey, show me, and then I'll play you more. So there's that back and forth there. But the reality is we can only have 5 in the game. So, for instance, if you take the 5 spot for us, you got Jericho, Jackson, and Royce. So those guys are competing with each other. You can play 2 of them some, but then if you're playing 2 of them, you're not playing Dylan or Kamaka. So it's just a matter of who we're playing, how the matchups are going, where guys seem to be in that moment. You certainly put a little bit more trust in guys that have been around a little longer, but then you got a guy like Jackson Hayes who's just, you know, with opportunity, demonstrating and showing what he can do. So you factor all those things in. And to answer your question, I think the 9 guys that have been playing, you know, those are guys that will continue to play and play major minutes. And as we get these other guys better and more consistent, they certainly, you know, may get more opportunity. But a lot of that's situational, and a lot of it's dependent on what they're able to do every single day in practice, and then when they do get an opportunity in the game, what they're able to do.
Thanks all.
Thank you, guys.
Shaka.